and welcome to Series 4, Episode 4 of In Suspense, a podcast and vodcast for fans and writers of crime fiction. I'm Laura North, and my co-host is, of course, the lovely Leslie Cara.
Hello.
In our last episode, we had a really amazing conversation with Philippa East on author well-being. It's, I think, being one of our most watched and listened to episodes that we've ever had. And I think it's really, having seen the tweets as well, it's really helped a lot more people than just us, which is really nice to see. There was certainly some eye-opening explanations of why we experience stress and anxiety, especially with those lions just over our shoulders, I think. And also just some really useful tips as well. And I'm pleased to say that my concentration levels have improved, which has been good. So that's been very useful. But I imagine, Leslie, that you're still feeling quite stressed right now because you've just had the house move.
Well, actually, yeah, I'm not stressed now. I feel completely relaxed. I mean, those of you who are watching this on YouTube may think, well, hang on, she's in the same place. But actually, I'm in a different room. I'm in a different house. The backdrop seems to have worked out the same. No, I mean, we're living in rented accommodation now in Suffolk while we look for our new house. So we're going to be here for about a year while we're searching in this area. And I feel completely relaxed because it's a new house and there's nothing to do. It's all lovely and immaculate and clean and lovely. And I just feel completely at home here. And just after all the stress of the last few years, actually, and particularly the last few months and weeks, you know, with my parents and all those sorts of things, I just feel, as if I'm now starting to unwind. And it feels like I'm living in some kind of holiday let now.
Oh, that's nice. But have you got the holiday mode, or are you back to writing yet?
No, I'm definitely back to writing. My agent listens to this. So. No, I am.
I won't tell on you.
I'm definitely back to writing.
Excellent.
I'm doing that routine, you know, I'm getting up early. Sometimes I get up early and do my word count then, or if, as in the last few days, we've been doing various things and unpacking and going to B&Q and all those sorts of things, washing up bowls and things that you suddenly realise you need. I've sort of, sometimes I've done it in the afternoon as well, but I am doing my word count. So, and I'm really enjoying that. And I've finally got broadband today. So I've been doing everything on my phone, which has been a bit of a pain for the last week, but broadband was activated today and Sky TV is coming tomorrow. So
yay!
So no, I'm not really stressed at the moment, but I did find Philippa East's advice and comments incredibly useful.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's been a really popular episode, hasn't it? And she also put something out, didn't she, on Twitter, a sort of worksheet.
Yeah.
It's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, really useful.
Yeah. And what about your week then, Laurie? What have you been up to?
What have I been doing? Well, it was publication day for the paperback of Safe at Home, and it was in quite a few magazines and in the Sun as well. So it was really exciting to see that. And the Sunday Express, which was exciting for me because I think that's the first time I've really hit the newspapers other than like the local newspaper.
And you're always in them, aren't you, Laurie?
Oh, it's every day. So thank you everybody who's messaged me and on Twitter and everywhere to say congratulations. It's been really lovely to have lots of messages and support. My book 4 structural edits round 2 came in, and they were quite not very many things to do, so I've managed to do them. So I'm just having like that final read through now again, just making sure that all the structural edits make sense, because I already know now that there are certain things now that can slip right through to those page proofs if you're not careful. So I'm giving it one final read through, and I've just been using my newfound concentration to do a bit of writing. So that's all I've been doing.
And your novel is fantastic. I finished it a few days ago.
Thank you.
I absolutely loved it. So, and I think it's on a special offer at the moment, so people need to buy it.
Yes, it's 99p on Kindle.
It's really good. Well done.
Yes, thank you.
Be very proud of yourself. I mean, all your novels, I've loved all of them, but
they get better. But on to today's episode, we're talking about working with an independent publisher, which will be really interesting for us because we don't. But I'm really keen to talk to authors who do work with independent publishers. We spoke to Susie Lyons about working with a digital publisher, and that was really fascinating. And I think it's going to be the same today, just getting a look at how differently things are done. And we're very lucky to have two authors coming on to talk to us shortly.
Yes, we are, aren't we?
We've not got much we can say about it, though, have we?
No, I was trying to do some research, but because I haven't had the internet or only on my phone, I didn't do as much as I would normally do. But the things I sort of did find out, which I was looking at somebody who'd been sort of, writing about the differences really, and dropped something. My understanding is that, I might be wrong here, but that independent publishing companies tend on the whole to be more mission driven than market driven, which enables them to take on and champion interesting voices that might not always get picked up by the big five, but which nonetheless, deserve to be read. So I do think that, without the independent publishers, the publishing industry would be far less diverse. It would be more insular, because independent publishers take more of a risk, I think, sometimes on authors, don't they?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And that's really brought to mind Agora, who are an independent publisher who was set up by an agency, Peter Fraser Dunlop, I think it is.
Oh, yes.
And they set up Agora as an independent publisher because they were so frustrated that they were having these amazing books come into their agency, but that the traditional publishers wouldn't take a chance on them. So everything that comes out of Agora is something that's got almost like a breath of fresh air, really. Always beautifully written and slightly different. So yeah, I always read anything that comes from them. And I think that's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, there's such a lot of talent out there, and of course, things don't always get picked up because if publishers don't think they can market it, or it doesn't fit into a preset sort of brand. Whereas independent publishers can be a little more adventurous, I think. Obviously the money's not the same in terms, they don't tend to offer huge advances and things like that, but often their royalties are higher, and as we will go on to find out in the rest of this show, they have good success with their books, don't they? So
yes, they certainly do. And we are certainly lucky to be joined by two psychological suspense authors, Emma Christie, author of The Silent Daughter, who's published by Welbeck Publishing Group, and Louise Mangos, author of A Husband's Secret, Strangers on the Boat, has recently signed with Red Dog, and her new novel, which is called
The Beaten Track.
Thank you. I literally just bought it as well, and it just went from my head because I hadn't written it down.
Me too. I've got it too. But
well done. And so they're joining us now. So welcome.
Welcome. Hello, Louise and Emma, and welcome both of you to In Suspense. We're absolutely delighted to have you on the show. And before we dive into the questions, let me start by reading, first of all, your bio, Louise. Louise Mangos grew up in the UK, but has spent more than half her life in Switzerland. She has published 2 suspense novels with HQ Stories, an imprint of HarperCollins. Her third novel, a psychological thriller, The Beaten Track, will be published with the independent Red Dog Press in April 2022. She lives in Switzerland with her Kiwi husband and 2 sons, and when she's not writing, you can find her on the cross-country ski trails, wow, or wild swimming in the lakes, depending on the season. She also writes short stories and flash fiction, which have won prizes and been published in various anthologies. She has recently completed her MA in crime writing at UEA. Welcome, Louise.
Welcome, amazing. So before we dive into questions, I'm just going to read your bio, Emma, and get that out of the way as well. So Emma Christie grew up in a book-filled house in Cumnock, an Ayrshire coal mining town. After quitting her law degree, Emma studied English literature and medieval history at Aberdeen University. She then spent 5 years working as a crime, court and local governor reporter. with one of the UK's top-selling regional daily newspapers, The Press and Journal. Throughout her journalism career, she secretly wanted to be every author she's ever interviewed. When Emma's not writing, she works as a tour director and lecturer in history, culture, and politics with a US travel company, leading educational journeys around Spain, France, and Portugal. She's lived in Chile, Canada, Mexico, Guatemala, Nicaragua, and Bulgaria. Now she can often be found in Portobello, Edinburgh's captivating seaside community. But most of the time, Emma lives in Barcelona with her girlfriend, Maria Jose, and far too many plants. The Silent Daughter is her first novel, and her second, which is out in January, is called Find Her First. So I hope I pronounced a few of those things right there. I think not.
You're forgiven.
Now, Emma, let's start with you. The Silent Daughter was recently shortlisted at Bloody Scotland for the Best Scottish Crime Debut 2021. It's had huge success. Do you want to start by telling us about The Silent Daughter? Because I think I read it probably about a year ago now, and it's still that kind of story that really stays with you. And I think about it a lot and how amazing it was.
Thank you, it's great to hear. So the Silent Daughter was my debut novel, and it's based in Edinburgh, specifically in Portobello, which is where I have a little flat in Edinburgh, which is the seaside community of Edinburgh, which so few people know about. And it follows the story of a news reporter called Chris Morrison, who is hunting for his missing daughter, Ruth. And at the same time as this, his wife is in a coma after a fall. And as the book progresses, you see him making connections between the disappearance and the accident that his wife has had until the finale, which we cannot reveal, of course. But I'm absolutely delighted, obviously, with how the book has gone. It took me about 2 years to write it, but it was the book that I quit my job to leave I quit my job to try and write back in 2009. So it's always going to be super special to me just to have this story finally made into a book.
That's amazing. And when you're not writing, you're also, you've not mentioned this in your bio, Emma, but you also do something with debut authors. Can you tell us about that and how it started?
Yeah, so I was published during the 2020 lockdown, and I met a group of writers online. I knew absolutely no writers at all until I got published. I mean, not a single one. And so it was really important for me to try and find some sense of community. So I started by joining a group of debut authors, and little by little, we became closer. And I had this idea last summer. I was in my camper van in the north of Spain, and I was having a chat with my girlfriend, and she said, "Well, why don't you do a festival or something to celebrate all these writers that are launched during lockdown?" So initially, I thought just doing a one-day event. But it grew arms and legs and ended up as the Diary of a Debut Novelist Festival, which was such a great success last year. And I honestly loved every minute of it. So I did a weekly session with 5 debut authors published during the lockdown, just sharing our experiences, our frustrations, our highs and our lows. And it's just been an absolutely fantastic way to get to know lots of writers and also to feel a little bit less alone, because we all have the same kind of experiences at the end of the day. And I decided to continue it this year, so I'm really excited that this week I will be launching the Diary of a Debut Novelist 2021 with all the debuts from this year, and it's just brilliant. I'm so excited about getting to know all of them and their stories and their experiences, and I would hope to continue with this well into the future. It's just a really positive experience for everyone, I think.
Amazing.
Fantastic. Yes, it sounds like you've got a full-time job there for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I do have quite a lot on, but I like it. I like to stay busy.
No, it's a lovely thing to do. And now, Louise, you also write, as well as novels, you also write short stories and flash fiction, don't you? I've been looking at the really impressive selection that you've got on your website. Do you want to tell us a little about that? What came first, the short fiction or the long fiction, and how you think it helps, or if it helps with your novel writing?
Well, it definitely helps with the novel writing. I started writing flash fiction, really, short stories, before I had the idea of writing a novel, basically because I didn't have time with bringing up 2 boisterous young boys to even think about writing long form fiction. So, and I've always written either journals or some terrible poetry when I was a teenager. And so the opportunity between my windows of time between raising a family, the short stories began to accumulate, and I began to look at places where I might be able to publish them. And short stories aren't a great income earner for a writer. So initially it was online journals, and then I began to get a few offers for anthologies, and then I started to enter competitions. Now the short fiction is definitely helping my novel writing, because it teaches me to edit in each of my chapters, for example, rather than just writing. I'm not a pantser, I'm a bit of a plotter, so each of my chapters are quite well planned, and the short story writing definitely helps that.
Fantastic. And both your previous novels were set in Switzerland, weren't they? I've just actually downloaded is it Her Husband's Secrets?
Yes.
I'm going to immerse myself in the Mangos oeuvre.
Oh, lovely. That's really good. Thank you.
But, is that also the case for the one that's coming out in April, The Beaten Track, which I mistakenly said earlier in our intro? I said to Laurie that I'd bought it, but I haven't, because it's not out yet, is it? What I meant was The Husband's Secret, but I will be buying that one. Can you tell us anything about The Beaten Track, or is it too early to talk about that yet?
No, I'm dying to talk about it, in fact, because it's my brand new baby, and the cover reveal was yesterday. I don't have a book yet, but that's the cover, and it's actually written in many settings. It has multiple global settings. It's about a backpacker called Sandrine who takes a round the world trip on a shoestring budget, and on her travels she meets and falls in love with somebody. They mysteriously disappear, and the story is told from two points of view, and the other point of view is a stalker. And I hope I didn't just give away some spoilers, but it culminates back in Switzerland, which is where she originally started her journey and where she lives full time. She returns home from these travels with these experiences of a stalker, and thinks she's home and free, and she meets somebody lovely who's going to take care of her. She finds out she's pregnant from her previous lover, and starts to feel comfortable settling down into home life, and then things go a little bit astray.
Ooh,
and I'll just say here, because I said I bought it as well, because I pre-ordered it, because Red Dog Press are saying for the first 50 pre-orders you get a signed copy, don't you? So I've put my order in, so I'm fingers crossed I was the first 50.
Excellent, that's fantastic. I had such a great response yesterday from everyone on social media, and of course Facebook was down for half the day, so the first half of the day it was Twitter, and the second half of the day it was Facebook, and I was thrilled. So I'm really looking forward to bringing that to you all.
Fantastic. And of course Red Dog Press is home to some of our favourite authors, isn't it? Rob Parker.
Yes, Rob and Chris.
Tom Coleman and Chris MacDonald, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and now you've joined that wonderful roster, so that's great. Now, our topic for today, funnily enough, is working with an independent publisher, and Laurie and I couldn't think of two better people to talk to than you and Emma. And Emma, now The Silent Daughter obviously was your debut, so can you tell us a little about the submissions process for that, and why you decided to, what drew you to Welbeck Publishing, the Welbeck Publishing Group?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose what drew me to them is that they were clearly the most passionate about the book, and it wasn't, it wasn't an easy process for me to get A Silent Daughter published, which I think if you read it, you will perhaps understand. It doesn't neatly fit into a particular genre, and it's been difficult to place. And what we said from the beginning, my agent and I, is we want someone who really believes in this book and isn't afraid to kind of step outside the box, I suppose, a wee bit. And with John Elliott at Welbeck Publishing, he was just so absolutely convinced that it would do well from the very beginning. He said, I want this book, and he loved it. And for me, that was better than anything, and it was just, it was a long process. I've been writing for 10 years. Got 2 novels that went through the submissions process and didn't get picked up. So I was well prepared for rejections. So it was just an absolutely amazing feeling when someone said, "I love this book enough." It's all that I love it, and so it was fantastic, and they have been so incredibly supportive since day one, and it's just been, for me, an incredibly positive experience. I cannot fault the editors and the publisher at Welbeck. It's been brilliant, I have to say, from day one. So I don't have anything to compare it to apart from the experiences of other writers, but I really I've had a very, very positive experience, I would say.
Yeah, and The Silent Daughter's done phenomenally well as well. So that's in itself shows how passionate they are.
I think the idea of Welbeck is the three, I believe the 3 people who set it up were very experienced in publishing, and what they had felt for a long time was that the big publishers had many, many authors, and a pot of cash which they would divide between lots of authors. And he said, we want to have fewer authors and that same pot of cash, but more investment in each writer, both in time and money. And that's a brilliant attitude, I think, to have. Rather to have the quality and the care that I'm getting, the quickness is that a word? I don't know. The speed with which they turn things around as well is brilliant. So I'm all for small independent publishers, I have to say.
And it's slightly different for you, Louise, I understand, as you've had previous novels published with the traditional publisher, with HQ Storage, part of HarperCollins. So can you tell us how you came across Red Dog Press and what appealed to you about working with an independent publisher, please?
So, Emma, I think you hit it on the head about the big publishers, about having hundreds of authors, but I don't think they do spread their pot amongst them all. And I think they tend to throw everyone against the wall, and whoever sticks gets that pot. And some of us mid-list authors don't find that pot of money at the end of the rainbow. So I managed to find an agent for The Beaten Track, and it went on submission during pandemic. I decided I wanted a different model to the one I had at HQ Stories, because the book there was, my 2 books there were initially HQ, they were digital first, and I wanted a traditional deal. And I'd had 4 different editors over 2 books, which was becoming quite frustrating. And the 4th editor went on maternity leave just as I was ready to submit this 3rd novel. And so my agent said, we'll go with some of the other publishing houses. And it did the rounds, but it was during the pandemic, and everyone said a really weird thing. They said this book has too many global settings to appeal to a reader during the pandemic. And I actually thought that was its unique selling point, because people want to travel. And I would have thought that going through Sandrine's story around the world would have been a way of perfect escapism from people who are locked inside their apartments. So she didn't manage to sell it to any of the big publishers. And then we agreed to part ways, and I knew that I was going to go for an independent press. And I had my eye on Red Dog, because we all know Rob and Chris, and we just think they're such lovely authors and make such a lovely family, or puppy family in the kennel, so to speak. So I sent it to Sean, and he absolutely fell in love with it. And he said to me, "Are you sure you want to publish with us? Because I think this has potential for a bestseller." So I said, I'm ready to be treated more like a member of the family rather than a big, a small
a small author in a big pot type thing. So and because of the passion he showed for the book, I signed with him even though I had offers from other digital publishers too. So I'm very happy to have gone this route.
Oh,
Fantastic.
That's brilliant. So let's talk a little now about what it's actually like working with an independent publisher. I mean, where do you think the big? You've mentioned some of them already, you know, but where do you think the main differences lie? Should we start with you, Louise, and then maybe move on to Emma? Where do you think the main differences lie? I mean, you've mentioned sort of some of them already, but.
Yes, so I have mentioned, I mean, the biggest thing for me when I was with HQ was the fact that I had 4 different editors. And when you go with a small publisher, so like Emma says, there's 3 of them who've set up Welbeck, they're a team already. So I really feel that teamwork becomes really concrete, and all the processes you go through when you start to edit your book, and you've got structural edits, and then there are line edits and proofing and cover designs and discussing how the marketing strategy, things like that. It's all within such a small team that the communication is open and honest. And I didn't feel that in the big publishing houses their teams are somehow so far away from each other. They, you know, the marketing team might actually be HarperCollins, whereas the editing team is HQ Stories, and they're distanced both physically and somehow with the relationship with the author. So that to me is the biggest difference.
That's interesting. And what about you, Emma? What are your thoughts on the main differences?
Yeah, I mean, again, based on what I've heard from writer friends who are with bigger publishers, I think the speed of responses, the speed of turning things around is remarkably different, I think. And I think the level of consultation, I mean, I'm often consulted, for example, with the cover design. Last week, I've got another, my second novel is coming out in January, Find Her First, and we are looking at the best tagline. You know, we had a meeting with the marketing team, the publisher, the editor, my agent, and, you know, discussing options and sort of debating various different aspects of the marketing. And then we've had numerous emails back and forth until we're all happy with the tagline, which maybe that would happen with a bigger publisher, but from what I've heard, a lot of it kind of goes on behind the scenes. And for the cover of The Silent Daughter, which I have a handy copy just here, I mean, I love this cover, but we went through so many different ideas before we got one. They sent me sort of 15 sort of vague ideas, and we whittled it down until we came up with that one. And it's interesting with Find Her First, my second one, we didn't go through that same process, but they did ask me, you know, how does the book feel? You know, because they started designing it before they'd actually read it, you know, and because, you know, it's all, as you know, in publishing, things happen way in advance. And so I sort of gave them the feel of it and some images that were important, and from that they created a really fantastic cover, which I love. The moment I saw it, I was like, yes, I think it's brilliant, which is a relief, because I remember my agent telling me that something like 90% of authors hate their covers. Yeah, I don't know where she got that stat. I think it was, you know, pulled out of her head, but, you know, I think she obviously has a lot of writers who don't like their covers, which for me would be a bit of a challenge, I think. I mean, I just absolutely love both my covers. So I think that's maybe an aspect as well, the sort of input on decisions that go beyond the sort of standard for a bigger publisher. I don't know if you find that, Louise, if you have more consultation on that level of things.
Hang on, Emma. Hang on a minute. We're asking the questions here. You're doing that. Thank you. You just jumped ahead and answered my question already. You can't now ask Louise. No. Louise, so interesting what Emma was saying. How did you find the cover experience of creating that gorgeous cover we can see for the Beaten Track?
Yeah, so I was incredibly lucky as well, because my first 2 covers with HQ Stories, I didn't get a lot of input, and I liked them in the end, but it was quite a fight to get certain things either removed from the covers or put on the covers. And with Red Dog, before he'd even given me any suggestions, he asked me for a mood board, which was this. It was an amazing thing. As an artist, I just loved being able to do this. I sent him colours, I sent him landscapes, I sent him pictures, I sent him things I'd found off the internet, and I sent him covers of other books that I really like in a similar genre. And I also sent him, he asked me to send him covers of books I don't like, so that he wouldn't end up giving me a choice, and some of the covers might be something I really didn't want to see. So he came up with a huge choice of covers, and we decided on the one we did because of the chilling aspect of the story and the fact that my protagonist is Swiss and comes back to Switzerland, so it seems appropriate that there should be snow on the cover. And I just found that the whole process was so much more enjoyable than trying to talk to somebody I'd never actually met in the marketing department to say, well, do you think this is going to work? And with the new cover, I'm just thrilled.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head, but you're more involved from the beginning, from the get-go with your covers. I mean, we are consulted, I'm sure Laurie is as well, I certainly am. But it's usually when it's been through all those early stages, and then they present you with a cover that the team already like. And I mean, I'm very lucky because I've loved all my covers and really, you know, appreciated them all. And I've had little, you know, I can say what I think about it and make a few tweaks if necessary. But sometimes the email is sort of, you know, we love it, and the marketing, and then you kind of feel, oh gosh, you know, if I don't like it, oh, I'm going to be causing a scene. But yeah, so it's just you are involved with a bigger publisher, but maybe at a later stage when you are perhaps less inclined to complain.
Yes, I think the other thing was you don't get sent just a choice of two covers, and then your editor says, well, actually we prefer number 2 and I prefer number 1, and even though I prefer number 1, they're always steering me towards number 2. And I mean, I wasn't unhappy with the covers of my other books, but I felt like I didn't have as much control. And as an artist, of course, I always want to control those kind of things. But no, I'm very happy with this one. So that's good.
Is it me next?
It's you, Leslie.
Oh, it's me. Right. Okay. Yes. Now we were, Laurie and I were talking earlier in our little introduction about, we didn't say much because we wanted to wait for you two to come on because you're the experts on this, but I've read somewhere that, and I think you touched on it earlier, Emma, that smaller independent publishing companies are more interested in cultivating a writer's voice rather than insisting they fit into a sort of pre-existing mould. And you were saying, weren't you, that because your novel didn't sort of fit neatly into a genre, but they maybe they take more of a risk on writers, and do you think that's true, that they're more interested in you know, taking a risk on good writing that's unique rather than one that's going to fit into a particular genre?
I think quite possibly. Certainly in my case, you know, with my second book, without giving anything away, I haven't talked much about it, so I'm not. I can't quite think how to speak about it without giving away spoilers. But it's a book that wouldn't fit very neatly anywhere. And so I think, I mean, certainly with my experience with Welbeck is that they haven't said to me, oh, this kind of book is doing well, or this kind of book is on trend, why don't you write something like that? I mean, I don't know if any publisher does that, but, you know, they've been absolutely amazing. I mean, with my second book, I had the dreaded second book syndrome. And about 2 months in, 90,000 words on the page, I realised I'd written the wrong book, and the pitch that I had sold them, I had written that book, but I no longer wanted to. It wasn't really what I wanted to be saying at all, and they were so understanding. I mean, I was so anxious. It was probably the low point of my entire writing career so far. Was that Monday morning, and I thought, I've written the wrong book, you know, and I know it. So I phoned my agent, and she said, she was very calm, and she said, let's just chat with Welbeck and explain the situation. And they were so understanding. There was no sort of no talk of, you know, are you sure? Do you know, just work at it, it'll be good enough. They just said, well, you know, if you don't feel it's the right book, then, you know, let's start again. And it was honestly sort of night and day from how I felt on that Monday morning to how I felt in the evening. And my editor was just so helpful. An interesting thing, actually, my editor at Welbeck is a freelance editor. I don't know how common that is in other publishing houses, but she's worked for many years with the sort of main employees of Welbeck and the founders. She's worked in various capacities with them, but she is freelance, which I find fantastic, because she only takes on projects that she really believes in, and, you know, luckily she believes in mine. So I don't know, and there's many aspects of the whole process that I think are not quite like the traditional experience, but certainly for me, in terms of adjusting the story and also the sort of time I needed to do it, they've been remarkably understanding. And willing to take on stories that aren't necessarily sort of neat fits for any particular genre, which, you know, for me is ideal. And I think they are helping me cultivate that as well, and sort of find my direction, because I don't really, you know, I think all of us struggle to define what kind of writing we have, you know, unless you're doing a sort of police procedural or something. It is quite difficult sometimes to think what is my voice. So I'm certainly hoping to continue with Welbeck and keep exploring and finding, you know, my voice more and more strongly with every book.
That's so interesting.
And I think, Louise, you were saying earlier about the concept of the team at the smaller publishing companies, and so I was wondering, do you think it's the case that maybe, you know, authors don't tend to get lost in the mid-list like they would in a bigger publisher, and that perhaps all of the authors that Red Dog Press and other smaller companies take on receive that equal attention because they're passionate about them? Do you think that's the case?
Oh, they definitely do. I know that Sean is just across the board, loves all his authors like he would a member of his family. It's interesting that Emma has talked about her voice, because this book is, the book I've written now, The Beaten Track, is very typically a psychological thriller, but I do have other projects that veer off that genre a little bit. I'm currently working on a humorous mystery involving a bumbling crime writer, and I've also written a more sort of Agatha Christie type contemporary mystery, and I think independent publishers are more willing to look at authors who are not sticking to their brand. That the big publishers like to slot their authors into a certain brand and keep them there. I think agents tend to do that too. So I felt a bit freed when my agent and I parted ways, because I thought, well, now I at the moment I haven't secured the future for some of these books that I'm working on, and it frees me up to finish them. And actually, Emma, it completely floors me that you wrote 90,000 words before you decided it wasn't the book that was going to be the next one. And I've got all these projects and I work on them from time to time, but I think if I'd got to 90,000 words, that would be a horrifying scenario for me, to have worked so hard on something and then decide it's not going to go out into the world. You're very brave.
Yeah, it was not easy, but the best decision ever, I have to say.
Good.
I think you know in your heart, don't you, when a book's working or it's not working. So a good decision all round. So it's not always the case, but sometimes the smaller publishers do have periods of open submissions for those who are unagented, and that gives them a chance to submit their work. And what advice would you give to an author who's in this situation and might be considering an independent publisher?
Yeah, I'm not sure that Welbeck does take submissions directly from writers, but I suppose what I would say in general to anyone who is wanting to go down that route is I would really recommend working with a freelance editor. For example, my editor works with various different individuals and publishing houses, and she's just been so incredibly useful and so incredibly insightful about my writing, and has helped me transform both of my books in ways that I absolutely could not have envisaged. I thought my books were done, when I handed them in, and I think the classic sort of feeling that the story's the best it could be, and then my editor come back and was like, well, how about this? She just asks the best questions. I think a really great editor asks questions about you and about your characters that maybe you're too close to see. So I think I would recommend before you submit to an independent publisher or whether or an agent or whatever it is, that particularly with a publisher, I would recommend taking on the advice, if you can afford it, of a freelance editor. I don't know much about Jericho Writers. I don't quite understand how that works, but I think they offer editing services as well. So I think just have someone in the industry have a good look at it, because like with agents, you do only get one chance to impress, and so just to make sure that you've absolutely got everything as good as it could be, that would be my advice.
I think that's fantastic advice, and I do that as well, actually. Even I've got the agent and the editor at the publishing house, but I still often employ an independent editor in advance if I'm like a bit uncertain about a book. So I think that's really good advice. What about you, Louise?
Well, that is absolutely incredible advice, because my latest one I've just finished, I did hire an editor for that, and I was so glad I did. And it's the Jericho Writers have, I think, lists of editors you can approach for work. I went through Reedsy, and there was also the literary consultancy, their own Cornerstones, I think. And so there are quite a few editors out there who are willing to give their time. And you're exactly right. You're just too close to your book, and it's playing like a film in your head, but it's not necessarily what's come out on the page. With my third book, it was my dissertation for my master's at UEA. So I had the most incredible resources, because I had 10 fellow crime writers in the crime writing masters and 3 tutors who pulled that book through for me, or with me, I should say. And so by the time Sean received it at Red Dog, it really didn't need it certainly didn't need any major structural work, and it had been through several proofreaders, and ideas had been discussed around the table. I think that resource for me was the most incredible resource I would ever have to write a book. Of course, I went through 2 years of masters for it, but it was really, that was priceless. Any author who's submitting to independent publishers should just don't get disillusioned with rejections, because it does take that one editor who falls in love with your work. And when Sean did that, I was just blown away with what he said about the beaten track. He said he just completely fell in love with the book.
So Emma has got to go very soon, as she's appearing on a TV programme. So we'll just ask you, Emma, one final question, which is, what are you reading right now? Is there anything you'd like to recommend to us?
Yeah, I'm actually reading a book that's been on my Kindle for years, and I finally bought, which is Bird by Bird. A guide
I recommended that this week.
Yeah, by Anne Lamott. And it is so good. I've read a lot of books about writing, and when I read them while I'm actually writing, I find that it messes with my head a wee bit. So last year when I was writing the ill-fated 90,000 words, I was at the same time reading Into the Woods and The Science of Storytelling and On Writing, reading all these at the same time and just thinking, what I am creating is not up to standard at all. I've just finished editing my second book, and at the moment I've really struggled to read novels for the past 2 or 3 months. I've been sort of travelling around a lot, visiting my family, and finishing the final edits, and I just have really struggled with novels, which is unusual for me, and so been turning to non-fiction. And Bird by Bird, it's just a fantastic book. It's very funny. I don't know if any of you have read it, but I hadn't expected it to be laugh out loud, and just everything. She has these very small chapters about writing, about the way you feel and what you think, and the sort of secret thoughts that you don't like to acknowledge. She sort of puts them on the page, and really, really highly recommend that book.
That's a great recommendation. I did read it, but a long while ago, but I think it deserves a rereading, I think.
Oh, well, I'll have to look out for it, because as I said, another friend's recommended that same book this week. Well, Emma, we will say goodbye to you, as we know you've got to leave. So thank you very much for being on the show for us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Can I just add one wee thing before I go about small independent publishers? What I would say to anyone is, I think there's maybe a belief that if you get signed to a small independent publisher, that means you're not as good as someone who gets published with a big publisher. I think when I was I was on submission, I really hoped that I would go with one of the big five. But I would just sort of express to anyone who maybe feels like that it's just absolutely not the case. And I think the most important thing, I think Louise and I have both said it, is that whoever the editor is, whether it's with Penguin or whether it's with Welbeck or anyone, is that they love your book. And I know some writers who've gone with the really big publishers and kind of haven't got the attention and the love that they hoped they would get for the book. And so, if you are offered a deal with a small publisher, if it feels right, I would say go with it. Don't worry about money and all that kind of stuff. That's not what it's about. It's about getting this sort of creation that you've made into the hands of someone who's going to care for it as much as you do. So that's a closing word for me.
Fantastically worded, and I think you're right. You find your champion, find your book champion.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'll head off now, but thank you very much for having me.
Emma. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
And what about you, Louise? What are you reading at the moment?
I've just finished reading. I love literary crime fiction. I have just finished reading, though, American Dirt, Janine Cummins.
Oh yes, I loved that. Yes,
and it's not listed as, it's not in the crime genre, but boy, there's lots of crimes going on in that book, and it's one of the most breathtaking narratives I think I've ever read, and it's blown me away that the way that she's been able to write every chapter at a pace which goes along with the train they're trying to get on. Anyone who's read it, I thought I was going to pass out because I hardly took a breath at that scene where she and her son are trying to get on this train.
Jump on the train. Yeah, it would.
So I can highly recommend that. But in terms of a novel that sits properly in the crime genre, but is also literary crime, my favourite book of last year was We Begin at the End, Chris Whittaker.
Oh yes,
and I sobbed my heart out as well.
Phenomenal, isn't it? Phenomenal.
It's a phenomenal book, yes. So those two books I can highly recommend.
Now, don't ask me, Laurie, because I haven't had a chance to read anything. I've been moving and packing and unpacking, and so it's as much as I've been able to do. It's
completely understandable,
right?
Well, I will just say that I have just almost finished reading The Wedding Party by Tammy Cohen, which I have devoured and really loved. So that's a really great edge of your seat holiday thriller. So everything you want in a psychological suspense. So that's a really good one. A good recommendation from me.
Brilliant. So now, Louise, it's time for our fun question. And since you found a wonderful home choosing an independent publisher, our question is for you: have you ever had to choose between two entirely different courses of action and made the wrong choice?
I was thinking of this because I think we go through our lives making choices, and in retrospect might think, what if? It's a kind of sliding door situation. I've travelled around the world, and I was once on a road travelling in the South Island in New Zealand on my bicycle, and I had a date with a guy, and he was down one road And the other road was taking me back to Auckland Airport, which was actually a long way up north, but where I was going to start my creative writing course at CU in Boulder in the US. So two huge life choices there. And I carried on up to Auckland Airport. I thought my writing is pulling me, and I kind of left behind this love of my life who I thought, what would have happened? Well, that sliding doors scenario actually ends up with a happy ending, because once I got back to Switzerland, I met my current husband, who happens to be a Kiwi. And so my connections with New Zealand continue. And I'm very much in love with him, of course. So all the choices we make in life should be the right ones, I believe. And we shouldn't really look back and decide that, oh, I think I've made the wrong choice. I think we need to make positive.
That's very true. You can only ever make the best choice for yourself at the time that you're living in, I think, can't you?
That's
Exactly.
right.
Yes.
Because it's very easy to sort of berate your younger self for making the wrong decisions. But as you said, Laurie, you make the decision based on the evidence and the feelings that you have right then, and you're a different person then. So yeah.
Exactly. What about you, Leslie? What's your one?
Oh, nothing as profound and lovely as Louise's, I'm afraid. I mean, my wrong choices tend to be centered on home furnishings, really. I mean, I couldn't think, I couldn't think of anything. And I was saying to my husband the other day, I said, in our fun question this week, I've got to come up with, when I've had to choose between two different courses of action and made the wrong choice, and I can't think of anything. And he said, the front room curtains. And I thought, oh God, obviously. And it's very strange for him to have a view on curtains, to be honest. But we had, in our last house, we had this very large, wide window, and I'm hopeless at dressmaking or the curtain making or anything to do with needles or machines. I'm totally impractical. And I can't even measure up a window without getting that wrong. So I managed to find this company that did these extra wide curtains, and so we got them delivered, and they cost a fortune, and when they were up they just looked hideous, and I couldn't get my money back because they'd been specially made, and his choice had been blinds from the beginning, and I'd sort of poo-pooed that, but he was right. So anyway, that was
never mind. There's always the one or two occasions when the husbands are right. We'll give
very rarely, I have to add, very rarely.
So my one, I thought of this one. So when the children are a bit smaller than they are now, and I was sort of doing a bit of writing, but I hadn't signed with anyone and I wasn't making any money, I thought I quite like to make a little bit of my own money. And so I sort of had a choice of sort of what kind of job I could get. And I thought, well, I've already got my kids, so I'll set up like a childminder. So I'll do like before and after school clubs. So I won't do anything during the day. I'll still have that time for writing, but before and after school, I'll look after other people's kids at the same time as mine. So I was like, right. So I did the qualification and I set myself up, got Ofsted inspected, and I started. And I just very quickly realized that I didn't want to be wiping any other child's nose ever. Like wiping your own child's nose, it's fine, but anyone else, it's the most disgusting thing. And parents would rock up at my door at like 7:30 in the morning with like these sick kids, and they were like, oh, they'll be fine for school. And I'm thinking, I don't think they are. What can you do? So I quickly shut down and I chalked that up to 100% the wrong choice for me.
That's hilarious.
I love that.
I think I managed about 3 months.
Oh dear. Well, I think that's all we've got time for in today's episode. It's been really, really fascinating, learning and talking about independent publishers. And it's been great speaking to both you and Emma, Louise. We've loved having you on the show. We really, really have.
So it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I think it was, I know Emma's gone now, but just what she said about finding the publisher that champions your book and your work and your career is above and beyond the most important thing, I think, for any author that they can find. So I think that's such a good point to make from her as well. So do look out for Emma's new book, which is Find Her First, which is coming out in January, and Louise's book, The Beaten Track, which is coming out in April, there we are. So I got that April, but available to pre-order now in hardback. We are having a short break because it's half term coming up and I'm a bit busy and so is Leslie. So we will be back at the start of November chatting about the submissions process with the wonderful Trevor Wood. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
He's a UEA. He's a UEA graduate too.
Is he? Yes, and he's also a debut author.
Debut 2020.
Yes, one of Emma's friends as well.
Yeah.
Everyone's connected.
Yes,
Absolutely. So that leaves me with the final task of saying it's goodbye from Louise. It's goodbye from me.
goodbye.
It's goodbye from them.